Chapter 2121. 2121. Who will kill who? Boom! A violent collision sound rang out in the void. The faces of the millions of people who had been watching the battle changed slightly when they saw this situation. That Dragon King's strength and speed are so terrifying. Rain Devil Sword God is completely helpless against him. He's passively defending. It's absolutely impossible for Rain Devil Sword God to kill the Dragon King in 3 minutes. His speed is too fast, and his attacks are also very terrifying. This Dragon King is not simple. Rain Demon Sword God's words just now were a slap in the face. Looking at the two people in the air who were almost evenly matched, everyone's expression changed again. Rain Demon Sword God's strength and title were created by himself. There was no doubt about his strength. Even when Rain Demon Sword God said that he would kill the Dragon King in 3 minutes, everyone believed him and waited for his great killing move and wonderful performance. However, the result was completely out of their expectations. The Dragon King of the Dragon Palace was not afraid at all, and was not weak at all. You want to kill me in 3 minutes? It's not certain who will kill who. Wang Xian's Dragon Claw landed heavily on top of Reverse Flow. Feeling the strong defense, he held the Dragon Claw tightly. Under the Dragon Claw, Reverse Flow slowly retracted. Splash! His body trembled slightly, and he retreated backward like flowing water, avoiding Wang Xian's attack. A hint of seriousness appeared on his face. What a fast speed! His speed is not slower than mine. In fact, he is even faster. The eyes of the Bright Elder from the Northern Expedition Trading Company narrowed slightly when he saw this scene. His expression changed slightly as he frowned slowly. Crack! Crack! Break for me! Aochi's roar was heard from the side, accompanied by the sound of breaking. The blood-red energy in his entire body churned around as the 3 Goyu in his pupils rotated slowly. Aochi's strange blood-red pupils locked onto the Rain Demon Sword God in the void. Dragon King, this humble subject is here to help you. Aochi let out a low roar as an explosive thunder sounded beside him. In an instant, his figure disappeared and reappeared beside Wang Xian. His arms, which were like thunder hammers and thunder spears, smashed heavily into the void. Goyu flew out from his eyes and landed on his 2 arms. Boom! 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 In an instant, streams of terrifying Goyu blood-red energy attacked the Rain Demon Sword God. 5 elements grinding. Wang Xian smiled when he saw Aochi charging over. Naturally, he had no objections to joining forces to fight against the Rain Demon Sword God. Bang bang bang. The Rain Demon Sword God's expression changed slightly when he saw Aochi's strange attack. He waved the rain sword in his hand and slashed forward. Every time he slashed, his body could not help but take a step back. After he blocked Aochi's attack, he retreated dozens of kilometers. Rain Demon Sword God's breathing was a little hurried, and his face was extremely gloomy. Roar! At this moment, the 5 divine dragons above the enormous 5 elements grinding mill roared, and streams of grey energy covered Rain Demon Sword God. His face changed again. Rain Demon Sword slashed the sky with 1 sword. Rain Demon Sword God roared, and his face was extremely ugly. A sharp sword that was hundreds of thousands of meters long appeared, slashing towards the 5 elements grinding mill. Boom! A terrifying collision sound rang out. The sharp sword slashed onto the 5 elements grinding mill, causing it to fly back hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Ah, Sect Master, save us! At this moment, miserable cries rang out. His breathing was somewhat hurried as his gaze swept downwards. There was a massacre going on down there. It was a one-sided massacre. In the beginning, the 120 godly state experts and 2 million disciples could easily crush the Dragon Palace. However, the situation was completely reversed. The 29 wisps of divine fire completely changed the situation of the battle. The sky was filled with branches that hung in the air and kept on reaping lives down there. The violent and terrifying sticks swept across a radius of 1,000,000 miles. The gods of the Yuhuashan sect were dying at a terrifying speed. 3 minutes had passed. Out of the 120 gods, 60 had died. Out of the 2 million disciples, less than 1 million had died. It was a one-sided war. In 10 minutes at most, the Yuhuashan sect would be completely annihilated in this void. Damn it, damn it. The rain demon sword god saw the scene below, and his face was burning with rage. He stared at Wang Xian and Aoqi in a frenzy. Northern Expedition Trading Company, didn't you say that their dragon palace only has one god of 9 wisps of divine fire? Didn't you say there are only 80 god-level powerhouses? All of a sudden, the rain demon sword god turned his head abruptly and stared at the Northern Expedition Trading Company. His blood-red eyes were cold as he roared. What? The sudden change caused the surrounding millions of people to be slightly startled. Some factions' eyes flickered as they looked at the Northern Expedition Trading Company's position. Their faces were filled with astonishment. Bastard! When the old man heard Rain Demon Sword God's sudden question, anger appeared on his face. His expression changed slightly. His words were to drag the Northern Expedition Trading Company into the water. However, after witnessing the Dragon Palace's strength, the Northern Expedition Trading Company could not enter the water so easily. That Dragon King's speed was completely beyond his expectations. Even if he were to make a move himself, it would be very difficult for him to stop him. In addition to the nearly 100 godly state experts, even if the Northern Expedition Trading Company were to suffer a great loss, it would still suffer a great loss. This was not in line with the purpose of their trading company. Our Northern Expedition Trading Company did not ask you to attack the Dragon Palace. Don't speak without evidence and slander us. Don't blame our Northern Expedition Trading Company for not showing any mercy. Sensing the gazes around him, the Elder of Light snorted coldly and threatened coldly. The Rain Demon Sword God stared at the Elder of Light with his slightly red eyes. He clenched his fists tightly and felt extremely aggrieved. Die! All of you die! He roared furiously and attacked Wang Xian and Aoqi. Dragon King, I'll trap him! Aoqi shouted loudly and blood-red chains appeared behind him. The dense chains slowly covered a radius of 100 kilometers. All right! Wang Xian nodded his head. With a wave of his arm, the 5 elements millstone appeared above his head. The poles of yin and yang were suspended below him. Search for enemies in the void and trap them. Aoqi let out a loud roar. The dense blood-red chains wrapped around the Rain Demon Sword God. 5 elements millstone trap. Roar! Roar! Wang Xian shouted at the same time. The millstone began to operate. The 3 divine dragons of earth, water, and wood attributes shone brightly. Spells filled with restraints were cast towards the Rain Demon Sword God. Wang Xian was confident that no one in the entire universe could withstand an opponent of the same level as the Berserk Dragon. Today I will let you guys see who will kill who. Wang Xian revealed a sinister expression. With the 5 elements grinding on his head, he stepped on the yin and yang poles and dashed towards the Rain Demon Sword God. Chapter 2122 2122 annihilated the unexpected intruders. Who would kill who? Millions of people looked at the battlefield in the void, their eyes shining. In this situation, the Dragon Palace had the upper hand. At first, the Rain Demon Sword God arrogantly said that he could kill the Dragon King in 3 minutes, but it had become a joke. Facing the Dragon Palace alone, the Rain Demon Sword God couldn't gain any advantage, not to mention that there was an expert from the Dragon Palace. In a 2-on-1 situation, would the Rain Demon Sword God be able to block it? Walala! In the air, countless blood-red chains covered the Rain Demon Sword God. The chains were densely packed, and each of them was half a meter thick. If one was completely entangled by so many chains, it would be difficult for one to escape. Wang Xian controlled the 5 elements grinding mill to lock onto the Rain Demon Sword God. The Primulus Saint wings on his back fluttered as he exerted his speed to the maximum. Wang Xian, who was moving at an extreme speed, was completely incomparable to the Rain Demon Sword God. In other words, if Wang Xian wanted to fight him, he wouldn't be able to escape. If Wang Xian wanted to escape, he wouldn't be able to catch up to him. In the battle, Wang Xian was already in an invincible position. Who will kill who? The rain demon sword god growled with an embarrassed expression when he saw Wang Xian and the chains that covered the sky that were attacking him. His cold eyes locked onto Wang Xian completely. The raindrop sword in his hand almost condensed into a stream of water. At this moment he could no longer escape. All he could do was to fight for his life. Kill! He growled in a low voice. Instantly, a torrential rain started to fall within a radius of a few hundred kilometers. A gigantic sword appeared in the sky. There were mountains and rivers on this sword. These were not carved on it, but real mountains and rivers. This sword was his divine kingdom. Wang! In an instant, a rain field appeared out of thin air beneath the horrifying huge sword divine kingdom. The raindrops became faster and faster. Gradually, the raindrops turned into rain swords, and the entire area was completely covered by the rain swords. The rain swords were very small, only the size of a thumb. However, they were lifelike, as if they were real sharp swords. Heavenly Rain Sword Domain. I once used this move to kill an expert at the peak of the godly state. I want to see who will kill who today. Rain Demon Sword God let out a low roar, and his body emitted a transcendent aura. Under this aura, the surrounding sword domain did not lose out to the aura of some experts at the peak of the godly state. Using the divine kingdom, is this Rain Demon Sword God's strongest move? Everyone was slightly shocked when they saw this scene. The raindrops turned into rain swords within 100 kilometers. This terrifying control power shocked everyone. Heavenly Rain Sword Domain. Wang Xian raised his eyebrows. His entire body was covered by the yin-yang and five elements ohms. The binding force of the five elements grinding had already descended. Pa 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 pa. When waves of energy entered the Heavenly Rain Sword Domain, the sharp swords landed on the energy and slowly pierced through it. Wang Xian was slightly shocked. A hint of surprise appeared on his face. Crash! At this moment, the densely packed blood-red chains entered the Heavenly Rain Sword Domain. Crack! 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 An even more intense collision sound rang out. The sharp swords landed on the blood-red chains, causing numerous cracks to appear, and the chains were cut off. However, there were too many chains. They continued to surge in crazily, and wound around the Rain Demon Sword God. I would like to see if your sword domain is stronger, or my 7 luminary space is stronger. Wang Xian took this opportunity to wave his arm toward the sky. The 5 elements millstone flew toward the sky above the giant sword divine kingdom, while the yin and yang poles flew toward the area below. In an instant, the 5 elements millstone and the yin and yang poles hovered above and below the sky rain sword domain. Break for me. At this moment an ice-cold roar was heard. Rain Devil Sword God was floating in the middle, When he saw the densely packed blood-red chains, he waved the raindrop sword in his hand. The rain sword within a radius of 100 kilometers was guided and directly attacked the chains. Bang bang bang. The intense collision caused the chains to quickly collapse. The densely packed blood-red chains disappeared at a terrifying speed. So powerful. The millions of people who were watching watched in astonishment. The rain swords were endless. No matter how many chains there were, they would be destroyed. Space of 7 elements. At this moment, Wang Xian let out a soft shout and flapped his 7-colored wings. Boom! 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 In the sky, 5 divine dragons roared and emitted rays of light. Below, the yin and yang poles suddenly rose slowly, and a 7-colored spatial domain slowly surrounded the sky rain sword domain. Oh! Rain demon sword god saw the 7-colored light that suddenly enveloped him. He was slightly shocked and looked over. A domain similar to my sky rain sword domain. A trace of seriousness appeared on his face, followed by a sinister smile. Then I would like to experience it. Clang, clang, clang. He let out a wild roar, and the entire area was filled with the metallic clang of the water sword. Crack, crack, crack. The 7-colored radiance slowly descended and collided with the sky rain sword domain. A terrifying friction was created. Earth conquers water. Wang Xian let out a low roar. His body moved, and he charged into the space of 7 elements. At the same time, the space of 7 luminaries slowly turned into a grayish color. Some earthy yellow energy was eroding towards the heavenly rain sword domain. The soil entered the water and caused the water sword to slowly lose control. What? At this moment, the expression of the god of sword rain demon changed drastically. Kill him! He immediately roared, and the remaining rain swords charged towards Wang Xian. Buzz! Wang Xian waved his arm, and an incomparably huge wall appeared in front of him. Countless rain swords landed on the wall, and were slowly eroded by the earth attribute. If you don't have any moves, you can die. Wang Xian's cold voice rang out as the 7 luminary space began to compress. Look, the heavenly rain sword domain of the rain demon sword god is actually being compressed. Is the victor going to be decided? That dragon king is so powerful. He isn't any weaker than the rain demon sword god. All the disciples of the Yuhuatian sect have basically been killed. This time, the Yuhuatian sect is completely defeated. When everyone saw this scene, their expressions changed slightly. At the side, only a dozen of the 120 gods had been killed. If Rain Devil Sword God was killed, this terrifying battle would come to an end. They are still in the mood to fight amongst themselves. Many gods have died. Damn it, what a waste. If Wuxia had attacked from this place, none of them would have survived. Now they are still fighting amongst themselves. Let's go. The entire Northern Alliance should be here. It will save us a lot of time. Just as everyone was paying attention to the battle on the battlefield, more than 10 figures flew over from the rear. In the middle were 2 old men surrounded by 10 youths. Chapter 2123 2123 2123 The Requisition of Eternal Thunderbolts. Die! In the space of 7 elements, Wang Xian stared at the rain demon sword god with a face full of killing intent. The space of 7 elements completely suppressed the heavenly rain sword domain. In the entire space of 7 elements, the rain demon sword god was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. No, the rain demon sword god, actually died at the hands of someone of the same level. I don't believe it. The rain demon sword god waved the long sword in his hand with a face full of unwillingness, and attacked Wang Xian. Boom! 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 With a thought, Wang Xian gathered the dragon claws around the rain demon sword god, and attacked him. After entering the space of 7 elements, one could either escape, or defend against the 7 elements. Otherwise, one would face endless attacks. Bang! 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 The huge dragon claws landed on his sword and his body, causing his expression to change drastically. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body was sent flying. Boom! 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 Following that, continuous attacks landed on his body. Wang Xian quietly hovered in the space of 7 luminaries and watched his death and fall. Buzz. 10 seconds later, the space of 7 luminaries slowly disappeared. There was a corpse floating in the air. When he died, he didn't scream too much. He was considered a man. He's dead. Rain Devil Sword God is dead. So fast. Rain Devil Sword God was killed by the Dragon King. Yu Huashan sect is finished. 120 gods were killed. When the 7 luminaries' space disappeared, and everyone saw the Dragon King with 7 colored wings and 2 horns standing proudly in the air, they were slightly shocked. They looked at the corpse beside them, their eyes flashing with a luster. It's over. It's really unexpected. This Dragon Palace and the Dragon King. The bright elder from the Northern Expedition Trading Company watched and muttered softly. He swept his gaze across the experts from the Dragon Palace and the Dragon King in the air, revealing a trace of solemnity. Not far away, the experts from the God-burning God dynasty and the demonic God sect also revealed fearful expressions. The strength of the Dragon Palace could indeed cause them to be fearful. This battle of the Dragon Palace has completely established their strength and status in the northern region. Some disciples looked at the battlefield with reverence. The Yu Huashan Divine Sect had a total of 120 gods and 2 million demigod level and above disciples. All of them had been killed by the Dragon Palace. This battle had shaken the northern region. In the entire Northern Territory Alliance, only the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Enchanting Divine Sect could contend with them. No other faction was a match for the Dragon Palace. Your Northern Territory Alliance is really boring. You all have the time to fight and kill here. It's great that you have so much energy. At this moment, an arrogant voice slowly sounded, covering an area of several thousand kilometers. The voice suddenly attracted everyone's attention. Some God Realm experts of the Northern Territory Alliance looked
Thunder
over.
God was the name given by the Thunder God Lord to the
peak stage
That
Eternal
is.
Thunderclap.
However,
Once
when
everyone
everyone
looked
looked
the peak
over
stage of the
and saw
deity
the
realm,
12 figures
they could be
walking
called
over
the
from the
Thunder
void.
God. Their
This was a
pupils
very
constricted
honorable title.
slightly.
In the
Two
entire
old men
northern
stood in the
region,
middle.
Thunder
There was a
God
purple
possessed
heart
great
protecting
authority
mirror
and
on their
prestige.
chests.
No
And on
one
the
dared
heart
to provoke
protecting
him,
mirror was written a
and
large
no
God
one dared
word.
to provoke him.
There were 10 young men
Greetings,
around them.
Thunder God.
They were wearing special
old man
clothing
from
from
the
the
Northern
Northern
Expedition
Expedition Trading Company
Eternal
was the
Thunderclap.
first to react.
Those 2
He
old
cupped
men
his
are the
hands
Thunder
toward
God,
the 2 old
the
men
Thunder
from
God of
Eternal
Eternal
Thunderclap.
Thunderclap.
Some people looked at the 2 old men in the middle with shock on their faces. Greetings, Lord Thunder God. Those experts whose strength had not reached the peak of the deity realm immediately bowed. In the Northern Expedition Trading Company, there are 40 godly state experts, and 2 peak of the godly state experts apart from Eternal Shocking Thunder's strongest faction. I'll recruit them. My younger brothers and sisters don't have any objections, right? Beside the old man, a long-haired young man with an imposing bearing and a proud expression held a folding fan in his hand. He looked indifferently at the young men and women around him as he spoke. Eternal Shocking Lightning and his group of 12 people completely ignored everyone from the Northern Region Alliance. However, his words caused everyone from the Northern Region Alliance to be shocked. Their eyes were filled with shock. Requisition? What did he mean? Big Brother's strength is stronger than ours. This time, it's naturally up to Big Brother to choose. However, I'll requisition the demonic god sect. I'll be the second one to choose. You guys don't have any objections, right? At the side, a burly youth holding a thunder hammer immediately spoke up. The other young men and women didn't speak. It was clear that they tacitly agreed. Haha, since Seventh Brother has chosen the enchanting divine sect, then I'll choose the god-burning divine dynasty. A youth with a long spear on his back laughed loudly as he spoke. Alright, it should be my turn next. Among the group of young men, one of the 2 ladies took a step forward. She looked at Wang Xian, who was in the void, and swept her gaze across all the members of the Dragon Palace. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on her face. I'll take this faction. If I'm not wrong, this is the Dragon Palace. They destroyed the Dragon Palace of the Tianyang Divine Dynasty. However, it's obvious that there are some unexpected surprises this time. She narrowed her eyes and smiled, revealing 2 dimples. Oh, that's not right. The Yuhuashan sect seems to have been destroyed. The 5 strongest factions that we agreed on are now missing one. However, at this moment, a delicate-looking young man's expression changed slightly. His expression slowly turned ugly. It seems to be true. Lei Tiansheng, your luck seems to be a little bad. The young man holding the folding fan said with a smile. What are they doing? When everyone in the Northern Region Alliance saw Eternal Thunderclap, and the other young men picking and choosing among themselves, their expressions changed slightly. All of them frowned. The strongest experts of the Northern Expedition Trading Company's God-burning God Dynasty also frowned. They had a bad premonition in their hearts. Young masters of Eternal Thunderclap, may I know what you are doing? The bright elder from the Northern Expedition Trading Company hesitated for a moment before asking. The Order of the Eternal God Lord. Now that the Northern Region has been invaded by the Demon Cave, all the Northern Region's factions are to resist the Demon Cave together. Anyone who disobeys will be killed without mercy. An elder's dignified gaze swept over everyone from the Northern Region Alliance, as he coldly said. What? At this moment, everyone's expressions changed drastically, their faces filled with shock and embarrassment. Mobilize all of your forces and enter the front lines. Northern Expedition Trading Company, call your guild leader, and follow this young Master Tio establish undying feats. The first youth to speak stepped forward, and directly ordered the Northern Expedition Trading Company. The old man's heart sank, and his expression changed drastically. I dare not disobey the Eternal God Lord's orders. Greetings, young Master Lei Beichen. Chapter 2124 2124 on the arrogant Lei Dongxue. I dare not disobey the order of the Eternal God Lord. Greetings, young Master Lei Beichen. The old man from the Northern Expedition Trading Company respectfully called out, his voice reverberating throughout the entire void. Lei Beichen, the strongest expert of the current generation of Eternal Shocking Thunder youths, had ignited 4 wisps of divine fire at such a young age. He was extremely famous throughout the entire Northern region. The bright old man from the Northern Expedition Trading Company naturally recognized him. The Northern Expedition Trading Company did not dare to remain silent in the face of his words. In a short span of 10 seconds, he had already figured it out. Clearly, the Thunder God Lord wanted to gather the strength of the entire Northern region and head to the front lines to fight against the demon lair. The main reason was to reduce Eternal Shocking Thunder's losses and make them cannon fodder. Even if he understood, he did not dare to resist in the slightest. Unless they immediately fled from the northern region. It was just as the Thunder God had said, those who disobeyed would die. Their foundation was here. How could they dare to escape? Moreover, there were 2 Thunder Gods in front of them personally. The God-burning God dynasty greets young Master Lei Donglin. The enchanting God sect greets young Master Lei Tianming. The eyes of the strongest experts from the God-burning God dynasty and the enchanting God sect flashed with helplessness. Seeing that the Northern Expedition Trading Company had submitted, they had no choice but to express their stance. They immediately bowed to the other 2 young men respectfully. When the surrounding millions of disciples saw this scene, a look of shock appeared on their faces. They looked at the group of young men in the air with a look of reverence. Lei Beichen, Lei Donglin, Lei Tianming, and the other 2 had looks of satisfaction on their faces as they nodded with smiles on their faces. Oh, why? Where's your dragon palace? The lady who was asking for the dragon palace looked at Wang Xian, who was in the air, and raised her eyebrows slightly. Eternal thunderclap. Wang Xian frowned slightly when he heard the lady's words. Everyone in the surroundings looked at him. Listen to this young lady's instructions. Wang Xian cupped his hands to the lady expressionlessly and said, You don't know me? The lady raised her head slightly, and her face was filled with arrogance. The dragon palace is small and insignificant. I'm sorry, ladies around. Wang Xian shook his head. He really didn't know this lady in front of him. Remember my name, Lei Dongxue. From now on, your dragon palace will follow me and listen to my commands. Lei Dongxue said faintly. As the most outstanding member of Eternal Thunderclap's generation, she had a face that could topple countries and cities, as well as stunning talent. Her name was definitely a well-known existence in the entire Eternal Thunderclap. Wait, the Yu Huatian divine sect has been destroyed by you. At the side, Lei Tianxing stared at Wang Xian with an extremely embarrassed expression as he questioned in a low voice. Leave none of them alive. Wang Xian looked at the young man with an expressionless face. Damn it. Lei Tianxing's face revealed a stern expression as a terrifying killing intent shot out from his entire body. He stared at Wang Xian with a face full of anger. Brother Tianxing, you can't blame others for your bad luck. Lei Dongxue sensed his killing intent and reminded him lightly. The Yu Huashan sect belongs to me to begin with. This little dragon palace will destroy it. Those who don't know are innocent. Lei Tianxing said with a cold expression, but he was easily resolved by Lei Dongxue. Lei Dongxue, you. Lei Tianxing's expression changed drastically. He knew that he was really unlucky this time. As the 5th-ranked young generation in this Eternal Shocking Thunder competition, he could have chosen the 5th-ranked faction in the northern region. Everyone knew that apart from Eternal Thunderclap, only 5 other factions were relatively stronger. However, the 5th faction was destroyed by the Dragon Palace. This was very disadvantageous for them to earn merit points in the future. Wang Xian's heart sank as he asked Lei Dongxue. Of course, I'm going to count the soldiers. I want to understand the soldiers under me. I'm going to your headquarters. I know it should be your divine kingdom. Lei Dongxue said to Wang Xian directly. I can summon the Dragon Palace directly. Wang Xian hesitated for a moment before saying. There's no need. A few of my friends also want to go to your place. I'm very curious about what kind of planet could give birth to such a force with so many gods. Lei Dongxue refused. He looked at him and said, Let's go. We'll head there immediately. Time is of the essence. Wang Xian stood there and didn't reply. He frowned slightly. Don't waste time. Lei Dongxue looked at him with a burning gaze and emphasized again. All right, let's go. Wang Xian nodded and gestured to the members of the Dragon Palace around him. Let's go to Planet Liberty first. I want to gather with a few friends. As she spoke, she immediately flew toward the teleportation formation. Wang Xian followed closely behind and teleported to the location of Planet Liberty. Haha, Miss Lei Dongxue, congratulations this time. When they arrived at the planet of freedom, a woman, a middle-aged man, and two young men and women walked over with smiles on their faces. Hehe, your luck is pretty good. Lei Dongxue smiled at the four of them and gestured to them. This is the leader of the Dragon Palace. He has followed me to establish a faction with meritorious deeds. There are many strong people. We have already heard about it. I believe that Miss Lei Dongxue will definitely be able to build up her immortal achievements this time around, and receive the Lord God's commendation. The woman said with some flattery. I am still very confident in defeating the rest. Let's go and take a look at the planet of the leader of the Dragon Palace. Lei Dongxue's face was filled with confidence as he asked Wang Xian to lead the way. Wang Xian's gaze swept across the four of them. There were two middle-aged men. One of them had the strength of 9 wisps of divine fire, while the other had the strength of 8 wisps of divine fire. The two young women had just ignited the divine fire. They should be Lei Dongxue's trusted aides or followers. He came to the teleportation formation and teleported towards Earth. Buzz. Soon, the group appeared at the seaside. Lei Dongxue immediately floated in the air and scanned her surroundings. The planet is a little small, but it's still average. She sized up her surroundings and commented indifferently. To him, Earth was indeed average. Let's go, Wang Xian said to her and flew straight into the ocean. Miss Lei Dongxue, this leader of the Dragon Palace seems a little unwilling. At the back, the woman saw Wang Xian and said coldly. Hehe, so what if they are unwilling? He will come and beg me soon. Lei Dongxue looked at Wang Xian and said coldly. Let's go. I'm a little curious. How can there be nearly 100 gods in a dragon palace? Do they have some treasures? Lei Dongxue's eyes flickered as he flew toward the dragon palace. The four of them followed closely and flew toward the dragon palace. Chapter 2126. 2126 Pride and Death. Come in. Wang Xian looked at Lei Dongxue and the rest behind him, and entered the dragon palace directly from the east gate. This dragon palace is really majestic. The young men and women behind Lei Dongxue looked at the dragon palace in front of them with sparkling eyes. Lei Dongxue, who was in front, scanned his surroundings with his sharp eyes and entered the dragon palace directly. Buzz! What thick spiritual energy! The two young men couldn't help but exclaim when they stepped into the dragon palace. The spiritual energy here is terrifyingly thick. The middle-aged man and the woman's expressions changed slightly, and their eyes were filled with shock. One of them had lit 9 wisps of divine fire, and the other had lit 8 wisps of divine fire. They had their own huge divine kingdom. However, the spiritual chi in their divine kingdom was very different. The spiritual chi in the Dragon Palace was more than 100 times more than in the outside world. This majestic spiritual chi was extremely terrifying. They had also been to the eternal divine kingdom, but the spiritual chi there was still very different from here. Perhaps only the eternal divine kingdom could have such spiritual chi. Lei Dongxue also looked around with awe in his heart, his eyes shining. Bring us to the central position. Also, call all the members of your Dragon Palace over. Lei Dongxue said to Wang Xian in a commanding tone. Wang Xian took a glance at her and walked straight into the Dragon King's hall. The moment they entered the Dragon King's hall, their faces were filled with awe. At this moment, Lei Dongxue was also visibly moved. She looked around with shock on her face. She looked at the dragon chair at the front, and the ancestral tree behind the dragon chair. This spiritual energy is almost 200 times stronger than the others. She mumbled as her eyes sparkled. She looked at the dragon chair that was 1,000 meters in size and walked straight to it. Prime Minister Gui, call all the members of the Dragon Palace over. Wang Xian said to Prime Minister Gui. It's the Dragon King. Prime Minister Gui looked at Lei Dongxue unkindly and nodded respectfully to Wang Xian. What an imposing divine throne. Not bad, not bad, not bad at all. She stepped onto the stairs and stood in front of the dragon throne. Is this the divine tree? She looked at the ancestral tree behind the dragon throne and sized it up. There are fruits on it. What kind of power is this? It's so strange. Lei Dongxue looked at the soul-returning bodies and was filled with astonishment. Little Xian, you're back. Who are they? At this moment, Sun Lingxiu's voice rang out. She and Ling Jian came out from the dragon bedroom and looked at Lei Dongxue and the rest with a frown. They're the people from Eternal Shocking Thunder. Wang Xian said to them and gestured for the two of them to come to his side. Eternal Shocking Thunder. The two girls were stunned for a moment, and a hint of solemnity appeared on their faces. Oh, Dragon King, are these your two wives? Lei Dongxue was attracted by their gazes and looked at the two of them with slight surprise. All of them have lit the divine fire, and their strength isn't weak. I really didn't expect it. Looking at Sun Lingxiu and Ling Jian, she was slightly surprised. They were so young, and their strength wasn't weaker than hers, and even stronger than hers. She was extremely surprised. This dragon palace was extraordinary. Dragon King. Dragon King. At this moment, members of the Dragon Palace entered the Dragon King Palace one by one. More than 20,000 members followed the leaders of the combat divisions. When they saw Lei Dongxue in front of the dragon throne, their eyes sparkled. All the members of the Dragon Palace have arrived? Only 20,000 or so. The woman next to Lei Dongxue looked down in surprise. All of them are elites. None of them are lower than rank 8 demigod. This force is very strong. The surprised voice came from the woman's mouth again. She glanced at the members of the Dragon Palace and smiled. Miss Lei Dongxue, congratulations. The power of the Dragon Palace is very strong, she said with a smile. Haha, not bad, not bad. Chapter 2129. 2129-2129. The vast front line of the war. Let's go. At noon the next day, Wang Xian led 15,000 disciples of the Dragon Palace out of the Dragon Palace. In the center of the front row, Lei Dongxue was riding on a fire phoenix dragon seed. She raised her head slightly and regained her arrogant look. Wang Xian followed by the side, and the group headed toward the teleportation formation. In order to prevent the people from the eternal thunderstorms from noticing anything, Wang Xian made Lei Dongxue return to her usual appearance. On the surface, she was the leader. Dragon King. The front line is located on the Steel Planet. That is the front line of the fight against the demonic beasts. We will need 2 hours to teleport through the formation. Lei Dongxue whispered to Wang Xian. All right, let's go there first. Wang Xian nodded. The Steel Planet was not a cultivation planet, but a technological planet. It was located not far from the border between the northern region and the central region. In the vast universe, not only were there cultivation planets, there were also many technological planets like Earth in the past. Powerful technological planets and technological weapons could destroy gods. However, after most technological planets learned about cultivation techniques, they gradually turned to cultivation techniques. After all, cultivation techniques could allow humans to live for tens of thousands of years, or even 100,000 years. They could travel through the void with their physical bodies. This was something that the technology of the technological planets could not achieve. Buzz. After 2 hours of continuous teleportation, Wang Xian and the rest arrived above a building made of steel. There were numerous transparent glass houses in the surroundings. People would appear from time to time in the glass houses, and some would enter the glass houses and disappear. The entire huge building was filled with a sense of technology. Wang Xian's gaze swept across the surroundings. There were many huge cities made of steel in the surroundings, which impacted everyone's line of sight. The Steel Planet is the strongest technological planet in the northern region. The technological weapons here can kill gods with 3 to 4 wisps of divine fire. If they were any stronger, they wouldn't be able to do it. Lei Dongxue raised his head proudly and transmitted his voice to Wang Xian. Now we need to report to the front line so that we can prepare for the upcoming battle. He continued. Lead the way. Wang Xian nodded and followed behind Lei Dongxue as they flew towards the front. In the surroundings, there were flying cars shuttling in the air. There were also many cultivators flying in the sky. There are so many people on this planet. Wang Xian swept his gaze across the surroundings. All of them were densely packed, and he asked curiously. The Steel Planet is now the front line of the entire Eternal Thunderclap. Currently, almost 100 cultivators and powerhouses from all the planets have come here. Not only did Eternal Thunderclap recruit many forces, they also attracted more than 1 billion cultivators to guard the front line through missions. In addition to the various powerful armies and logistics personnel of Eternal Shocking Thunder, the number of people on this planet has increased by more than 2 billion. Lei Dongxue reported. By the way, have the experts who were stationed at the energy tide come over? Wang Xian's heart skipped a beat as he asked hurriedly. No. The energy tide is also a relatively important place. Once we evacuate, it will be completely occupied by the Eternal Divine Leaf. Lei Dongxue said with some doubt. Although she was puzzled, she didn't dare to ask further. That's good. Wang Xian mumbled. More than 10,000 people flew forward. An incomparably huge steel city wall stood in the void. The entire steel city wall was at least tens of millions of kilometers long. Its height reached up to millions of kilometers. At this moment, cultivators were standing densely on the silver-white steel city wall. In front of them, there was a meteorite floating in the void. There were big and small meteorites. The big meteorites were hundreds of kilometers in size, while the small ones were thousands of meters in size. It looked extremely chaotic. The meteorites were densely packed, and there was a demonic roar in the middle. When Wang Xian got closer to the steel city wall, he noticed that there were many gigantic war machines on the steel city wall. Boom! At this moment, A beam of light with a diameter of 1,000 meters headed straight for the demonic beast in front of him. The terrifying beam of light penetrated tens of millions of kilometers into the void. Most of the demonic beasts that were hit by it would not be able to escape death. That is the light obliteration cannon. It uses technology to control the power of light, and is able to kill an immortal-level existence. Lei Dongxue saw Wang Xian's curious expression, and explained to him through voice transmission. It's really magical. It's similar to a formation. Wang Xian's eyes sparkled as he said. Technology is indeed similar to a formation. It's a way of using attributes. Lei Dongxue hesitated for a moment before saying. He landed on the silver-white steel city wall, and looked at the endless void in front of him. Wang Xian's eyes sparkled. This was the starry sky of the universe. Let's go to the Eternal Thunderclap Command Center. Lei Dongxue walked toward the center. Miss Lei, congratulations. I heard that you are now in control of a very powerful force. Lord Lei. Lord Lei. Along the way, some people greeted Lei Dongxue enthusiastically. Wang Xian watched silently from the side. After walking for only a dozen kilometers, he encountered more than 30 gods. The number of gods here was terrifying. Dragon King, we're here. It might be a little offensive to speak later. Lei Dongxue said softly, and looked at the command center in front of him. It's all right. Act according to your character. Wang Xian nodded his head. The command center of a silvery white steel building was filled with a sense of technology. When Lei Dongxue walked forward, the metal door opened directly. Inside was an incomparably huge command center. The entire battlefield could be seen clearly from here. At this moment, there were more than 1 million people gathered inside. They are all here. Wang Xian's gaze swept across the area, and realized that the people from the Northern Expedition Trading Company, the God-Burning Dynasty, and the Enchanting Divine Gate were all inside. He narrowed his eyes slightly. His gaze swept across the location of the Northern Expedition Trading Company. When he killed the Rain Demon Sword God, he had mentioned that the Northern Expedition Trading Company was the one who told them about this news. Wang Xian was somewhat suspicious. The Northern Expedition Trading Company had to a certain extent been involved in the Yu Huashan sect's ambush. Lei Dongxue, you are the only one left. At the front, Lei Tianqing saw them arrive and said coldly. His gaze swept past Wang Xian and the others, and a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. This time, if it wasn't for the Dragon Palace, he could have taken over the Yu Huashan sect. But now, compared to Lei Donglin, Lei Beichen, and the others, the difference was enormous. In the future, the difference between them would only grow larger and larger. This was all because of the Dragon Palace and Ridong Shui. Towards this, he was filled with hatred towards Ridong Shui and the Dragon Palace. Chapter 2130. 2130 in 2130's intense battle. You guys are early. Lei Dongxue scanned the surroundings, and led Wang Xian, and the rest straight ahead. Aren't there close to 100 godly state experts in the Dragon Palace? Why are there only 50 of them here? Lei Beichen, and the rest looked behind Lei Dongxue. They were slightly surprised as they swept their gaze across the area. I have my own plans for this. There's no need for everyone to worry about me. Lei Dongxue smiled faintly, his gaze turning to an old man in front of him. He bowed and called out, Lord Thunder God. That's right, since you're all here. I'll call the rest of the Thunder Gods over. The old man's gaze swept over the group of experts in front of him, and he nodded indifferently. With a thought, he transmitted his voice to each of them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Are all the forces of the Northern Territory Alliance here? I heard that they are still in the mood to fight among themselves. It seems that they are living too comfortably. Figures slowly appeared in front of them. They were standing on the high platform in front of them. There were about 20 figures. Some of them were wearing the clothes of the Eternal Thunderclap clan, while others were wearing battle armors. Each of the old men exuded a terrifying pressure, and were filled with dignity. Their eyes swept forward, and their faces were filled with pride. Seeing the 20 figures in front of them, the faces of everyone from the Northern Territory Alliance changed slightly, and their eyes were filled with respect. Even the three-peak deity realm experts from the Northern Territory Alliance were looking at them solemnly. Hearing the Thunder God's words, they looked a little embarrassed. "Greetings, Lord Thunder God." Lei Dong, Shuelei, Bei Chun, and the other youths immediately called out respectfully when they saw the 20 Thunder Gods. Close to 600 deity realm experts, and 3-peak deity realm experts. Their strength isn't bad. There are some things that you should know. Don't have any thoughts. The entire Northern Territory is in danger now. If it wasn't for us, Eternal Shocking Thunder, you would have been destroyed. This time, we will recruit you. Listen to the orders of my Eternal Shocking Thunder disciples. Anyone who dares to disobey us will be exterminated by our hands. An old man with a knife scar on his face, and a ferocious expression on his face, dressed in battle armor, coldly warned the other factions. Everyone, don't worry. We Eternal Shocking Thunder are not asking you to die. This is also an opportunity for you. The treasury of Eternal Shocking Thunder is open to all of you. As long as you have merit points, you can exchange for any treasure. Especially the 3-peak God Realm experts. If you can kill 2-peak God Realm experts, our God Lord has said that we can directly confer you the title of Thunder God. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, an old man beside him took over his words and comforted him. A big stick and a sweet date. After all, the forces of the Northern Region Alliance were not slaves. Below them, the forces heard their words and did not speak. They already knew this. Although they were directly recruited, it was better if they were lucky and could obtain many items. Some items were extremely precious to them. They could only accept such a situation. You 10 outstanding disciples, each choose a stronghold. The more demonic beasts you kill, the more meritorious deeds you will receive. In addition, special operations are required. You must unconditionally agree. The scarred Thunder God, who had just started speaking, said. As his voice fell, he disappeared. The rest of the Thunder Gods also left. Only one stayed behind. You should know the location of the stronghold. Choose your stronghold, and organize an attack in an hour. That faction of the Northern Alliance is in trouble. Lei Dongxue said. No wonder Eternal Thunderclap would recruit all the factions in the Northern region. Even Eternal Thunderclap can't withstand such a loss. Wang Xian said plainly. Dragon King, there are demons attacking again. At this moment, Ao Qitian's voice rang out. Wang Xian looked ahead, and saw a cloud of black fog flying towards them. The black fog covered an area of 200 to 300 kilometers. It was impossible to see how many demons were in the black fog. There's such a method. Wang Xian raised his eyebrows. Lei Dongxue, who was beside him, nodded his head. A godly state member will lead 1,000 members in charge over. Wang Xian stared into the black fog with his yin-yang and 5 elements dragon eyes, and ordered immediately. Yes. The group of Dragon Palace members flew over immediately, and charged towards Yao Xia, who was in the black fog. Following that, Yao Xia would definitely invade every 10 minutes or so. There would be all kinds of methods and ambushes. Fortunately, Wang Xian had the yin-yang and 5 elements dragon eyes. Otherwise, unless Ao Qitian and the rest kept attacking, there would definitely be casualties. In front of the entire Steel City wall, the demonic roars and human screams were incessant. Especially in the middle, the battle became even more intense. Get ready, take the initiative to attack. An hour later, a voice suddenly sounded. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, 2 to 3 million cultivators flew out from the back. The leaders were 5 armored thunder gods. Some of them were wielding thunder hammers, while others were wielding spears. Their bodies were emitting a terrifying aura. The million-strong army was silent. Only a majestic aura was suspended in the air, causing one's heart to palpitate. At least 200 gods were standing behind the 5 thunder gods. It was extremely terrifying. It's time to attack. Wang Xian looked over, and a hint of seriousness appeared on his face. Dragon King, prepare to attack. Lei Dongxue whispered to him, before floating in the air. Disciples of the Dragon Palace, line up. She shouted loudly. Walala. Wang Xian gestured to the members of the Dragon Palace and floated behind Lei Dongxue. Disciples of the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce, follow me. Disciples of the God-burning dynasty, prepare for battle. Strong and confident shouts came from the right. The forces of the Northern Region Alliance will be the vanguard this time. Attack! In the sky, a thunder god shouted coldly. Lei Dongxue led more than 10,000 members of the Dragon Palace towards the right. Soon, they gathered together with more than 6 million forces of the Northern Region Alliance. This time, almost 80% of the forces of the Northern Territory Alliance were mobilized. There were 500 God Realm experts alone. Buzz! At this moment, 5 figures suddenly came to the center of the forces of the Northern Territory Alliance. The Northern Territory Alliance will be led by the 5 of us in this battle. No force of the Northern Territory Alliance can disobey. Those who disobey will be killed. An old man wearing a bamboo hat shouted with a cold face. Ha! Everyone from the Northern Alliance was slightly shocked when they saw the 5 figures that suddenly floated in the air in front of them. What are they doing? Wang Xian raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at them in astonishment. They want merit points. What a good plan. Although the 10 of U.S. disciples have recruited all the factions of the Northern Alliance, and all the factions listen to our orders, those factions should consider the orders of the experts of the Northern Alliance. The Northern Territory Alliance only has 3 peak deity realm experts. The other forces don't dare to refuse. If they really attack and kill those who disobey, we won't be able to protect them. Lei Dongxue's expression slightly changed as he solemnly said from the side. Chapter 2132. 2132. In the midst of a terrible battle. In front of the steel wall, the president and vice president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, the leader of the Gate of God, and Lei Baichen and Lei Tianming. The 5 of them stood in the center of the position, exuding a powerful force, staring at all the forces of the Northern Alliance. 3 gods at the top, 5 or 6 million disciples of the Northern League, and about 500 gods. When the eternal thunderclaps Redong Linli and the others saw this scene, their faces slowly began to turn ugly. They were doing this because they wanted to control the power of the entire Northern Alliance in their own hands, so that they could obtain the most merit points. Although they had the authority to order the various powers of the Northern Alliance, these powers, under the threat of the 3 peak stage deities of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, had no choice but to obey. Normally, as the most outstanding young generation of Eternal Thunderclap, they had the ability to make the various factions ignore the orders of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the enchanting Divine Gate. However, they still had to face Lei Baichen and Lei Tianming. If they appeared, Lei Baichen and Lei Tianming would also appear. As the first and second place winners of the grand competition not long ago, if they were to join forces, even if the other 8 people were to join forces, it would be difficult for them to contend against them. Damn it! I didn't expect the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the bewitching Divine Gate to actually want to direct this war. Young Master Lei Donglin, if you can't stop them, we must listen to the orders of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the bewitching Divine Gate. Otherwise, once they take revenge on us. When the Emperor of the God-burning dynasty saw this scene, his expression was similarly unsightly as he spoke to Lei Donglin by his side. In the entire Northern Region Alliance, only the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the demonic god sect had peak deity realm experts. Now that the 2 factions had joined forces, they did not dare to disobey. If I step out to stop them, Lei Baichen, Lei Tianming, and the others will also step out to stop them. Lei Donglin's expression was extremely ugly. He looked at the other people around him and saw that their expressions were the same, filled with helplessness. There's nothing we can do. He shook his head in a low voice. He felt a little helpless. Then our God-burning God dynasty has nothing we can do. The Emperor of the God-burning God dynasty said in a low voice. He looked at the 5 people in front of him and said directly, our God-burning God dynasty listens to the orders of the guild leader and the sect leader. We also listened to the orders of the 5 of you. Seeing that the God-burning God dynasty had responded, the other factions immediately spoke up as well. Ha ha ha, good good. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming looked at each other when they saw this scene. Their faces were filled with excitement. Next, I hope that everyone will obediently follow orders. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your lives. Lei Beichen spoke out with a faint warning. Yes. The disciples of the Northern Region Alliance immediately responded loudly. It's not bad to be able to unite them. Let's go. At this moment, a Thunder God at the back said calmly. It's Lord Thunder God. Let's go. Lei Beichen shouted loudly, high-spirited. Let's go. The Elder of Light from the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce also shouted loudly. 5 to 6 million troops immediately flew towards the void ahead. Wind-type cultivators with flying mounts, go ahead and scout the situation. Flying Wing Sect, go ahead and scout. The expression of the youth who had recruited them, Eternal Shocking Thunder, was also incomparably ugly. Going to investigate was undoubtedly the most dangerous. One moment of carelessness could result in death. Yes. However, how could they dare to disobey at this moment? If they went to investigate, they would still have a chance of surviving. If they disobeyed, they would definitely perish in the future. In an instant, more than 100,000 cultivators with green wings and mounts flew forward to investigate the situation. After flying for only 50 to 60 kilometers, miserable screams sounded. There are more than 10,000 demons here. A disciple shouted with a face full of fear. There are also demons here. We have demons here too. Following that, voices rang out one after another. Some disciples were being chased by thousands, or even tens of thousands of demonic beasts. Some were directly swallowed into their mouths. Northern Expedition Trading Company disciples, Enchanting Divine Gate disciples, kill. Danger was detected. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming immediately ordered loudly. Kill, kill, kill. A group of disciples and gods immediately rushed over and killed Wuxia. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming are really smart. They got the other factions to investigate the situation. After confirming that it was safe, they ordered the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the disciples of the Enchanting Celestial Sect to take action. Such meritorious deeds are all theirs. As the other factions did not fight with Wuxia, although the people sent out to investigate were very dangerous, they could reduce the losses by a lot. They wouldn't have much of an opinion, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The ones at a disadvantage are only me and the other 7 disciples. Lei Dongxue looked ahead and said to Wang Xian. Okay. Wang Xian nodded his head slightly. A thoughtful look appeared on his face. After being recruited to the front line, he had to think of a way to obtain a large number of Wuxia's corpses. Otherwise, staying here would be under the control of others. Moreover, it would be very dangerous. Boom, boom, boom. As the battle progressed, Wang Xian and the rest did not have the chance to make a move because of the presence of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the disciples of the Enchanting Divine Sect. A large group of people were sent to scout ahead. After the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the disciples of the Enchanting Divine Sect confirmed that they were safe, they made their move and killed them. The huge group of people advanced forward rapidly. Soon they entered the dense meteor rocks. However, more and more people died, especially those who went to investigate. Among the hundreds of thousands of people, at least 70% of them would die. Meanwhile, the disciples of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, the Enchanting Divine Sect, and even the godly state experts also began to die. The battle was extremely tragic. Wails, roars, and howls filled an area of tens of thousands of kilometers. The deeper they went, the more terrifying the number of demonic beasts became. When they advanced about 500 kilometers, the number of demonic beasts around them had already reached hundreds of millions. Among them, there were 200 to 300 deity-level demonic beasts. Young Master Lei Beichen, we have to get everyone to take action. Otherwise, our Northern Expedition Trading Company will suffer too many losses. In the center, The Northern Expedition Trading Company's president said with an embarrassed expression when he saw the loss of his disciples. Sure. Beside him lay Beichen, whose face was filled with excitement, hesitated for a moment before slowly nodding his head. Chapter 2133. 2133 disobeyed the order and died? Go. Members of the Dragon Palace, maintain your formation. Saturn turtles defend the front to prevent a large number of demonic beasts from charging over. The Starwood Combat Division is behind the Saturn turtles, attacking from a distance. The Demon Combat Division and the Thunder Division are on the two wings. The Support Division and the Heaven's Eye Arrow Division are at the back. On the void battleground that was filled with meteorites, Wuxia stared at the hundreds of millions of demonic beasts in front of him and ordered loudly. It's the Dragon King. More than 10,000 members of the Dragon Palace responded loudly. The Saturn Turtle, one of the subordinates that the Transcendence continent had subdued, was now a dragon seed of the Dragon Palace. They possessed extremely strong defensive capabilities and were not very strong in terms of offensive capabilities. However, it was the best choice for them to defend the front. The members of the Starwood Combat Division at the back were engaging in long-range attacks. The Devil Combat Division and the Thunder Division were on the left and right. There were already 10 berserk dragon species among them, and their combat strength was extremely violent. The gods of the Dragon Palace who had ignited the godly fire locked onto those god-level demons. Kill, kill. Aochitian roared and smashed the ocean-pacifying needle in his hand toward the front. Roar, roar, roar. Sensing Aochitian's violent power, a demon with 9 wisps of godly fire in front of him charged toward him without fear. Aochitian's blood-red Goyu's eyes turned slightly, and he directly attacked that demonic fiend. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 2,000 Saturn turtles at the forefront trembled slightly. Their bodies were enveloped by a thick earth elemental energy. Their entire bodies were like a moving castle, and they charged forward directly. The Saturn turtles in a row charged forward with a shocking power. They charged into Yaoxia's army without any fear. Roar, roar, roar. Yaoxia's blood-red eyes stared at them as he charged forward. Looking at this bloody battlefield from afar was terrifying. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At the rear, the members of the Heavenly Eye Archery Division drew their bows and shot arrows. Tens of thousands of arrows charged forward. Mao Zixin and the other 2 god-level archers, in particular, shot arrows one after another, instantly piercing through tens of thousands of demons. In just one round of attack, they had killed hundreds of thousands of demons. Roar, roar, roar. The members of the Demon War Division and the Thunder Division attacked the demons one by one from the 2 wings. With the help of the water elemental dolphins at the rear, the sky blue light on their bodies circulated. Special sound waves reverberated throughout the battlefield of the Dragon Palace, supporting the members of the Dragon Palace and suppressing Yaoxia. The orderly attacking methods tore a hole in Yaoxia's army. After the Saturn turtle blocked the first wave of attacks, Yaoxia was entangled by countless thorns. As the most powerful combat division of the Dragon Palace, the Starwood Combat Division, once they ignited the divine fire, they were comparable to the Mad Dragon. Under such circumstances, Yaoxia would be killed quickly in the face of their attacks. In addition to the fact that the members of the Dragon Palace had the combat strength of at least a rank 9 demigod, more than 10,000 members of the Dragon Palace could match the army of millions of other forces. In fact, the members of the Dragon Palace suffered very little losses due to their perfect cooperation. Since the Dragon Palace was founded, it had experienced more than a dozen wars of all sizes, all of which were extremely terrifying. His killing speed was even comparable to that of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Demonic God Sect. One had to know that the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Demonic God Sect had more than 1 million disciples. Hee. When Wuxia heard Lei Dongshua's evaluation from the side, a faint smile appeared on his face. The current Dragon Palace was not complete. The most powerful demonic beast in assassination was not around, and the dragon guards with strong killing power were no longer around. The strongest AO crab was not around either. There are no more than 3 legions of eternal thunderclap that are comparable to your Dragon Palace army, Dragon King. Lei Dongxue said with some flattery. Wang Xian smiled and quietly hovered in the air as he watched the battle in front of him. He did not make a move. What force is that? More than 15,000 people actually have such a terrifying force. Even the core battle team of Eternal Thunderclap is only SSO. At the last position of the battlefield, the 5 thunder gods led millions of disciples. They didn't take action now, so there was no need for them to take action, since there were so many demons. One of the thunder gods looked at the dragon palace with surprise in his eyes. It's indeed very strong. It's controlled by that girl Lei Dongxue. It should be the dragon palace. It's a new force, and there seem to be a lot of god-level experts. A thunder god said. It's a good choice to recruit other forces. It can reduce our losses. This force is really good. More than 10,000 people can make up a few million core. We can ask the Lord God to take them in the future. A thunder god said with surprise in his eyes. Sky. At this moment, the 3,000 members of the Starwood Combat Division shouted in unison on the battlefield where the Dragon Palace was. The branches covered an area of 500 to 600 kilometers in an instant. Their battlefield was completely covered. Millions of demons were instantly covered. Roar! 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 In an instant, miserable screams were heard. One demon after another was lifted into the air and pierced through by thorns. What? How could the Dragon Palace be so powerful? The horrifying scene from the Dragon Palace attracted the attention of many forces around. When they saw the thorns from the Dragon Palace dragging millions of demonic beasts into the air, they were shocked. More than 3,000 people killed millions of demonic beasts in one move. Although there were 7 or 8 God Realm experts among the 3,000 people, this scene was too terrifying. Damn it, how can the forces of the Dragon Palace be so powerful? Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming, who were in the center, saw this scene and their faces darkened. Killing Yaoxia meant merit points. The more they killed, the higher their merit points would be. The reason why they joined forces was to suppress the other disciples. They had never thought that the Dragon Palace would be so terrifying. They had killed millions of Yaoxia with one move. If they continued to kill, their merit points might be surpassed by Lei Dongxue. The two of them looked at each other, their faces slightly embarrassed. We can't let the Dragon Palace continue to fight like this. Lei Beichen growled in a low voice. Lei Tianming also nodded heavily. This Dragon Palace is really surprising. The bright elder of the Northern Expedition Trading Company swept his gaze over, his eyes shining. Their strength is indeed very strong. Young masters, there's no need to be anxious. It's just the beginning. They only have 10,000 people. When they encounter powerful demons and suffer heavy losses, their combat strength will naturally be much weaker than before. The president of the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce didn't take the Dragon Palace seriously and said indifferently. Chapter 2134. 2134 disobeyed the order and died. That's true. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming's eyes shone when they heard the Northern Expedition's guild leader's words. No matter how strong the Dragon Palace was, there was no peak divine realm existence. No matter how strong they were, they only had over 10,000 members. If they lost 7,000 to 8,000 members, it would be enough to cause them severe injuries. There was nothing to worry about. Then I'll have to trouble you in a while, guild leader. Lei Beichen said to the guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company with a smile on his face. The guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company nodded his head faintly. What kind of demon beast is that? To actually have such methods, it's truly extraordinary. At the back, a thunder god's gaze was fixed on the members of the Starwood Combat Division as he exclaimed in shock. If such a force is recruited by eternal shocking thunder, we'll talk about it after this war is over. A thunder god spoke. and a thunder god beside him interrupted him. After the thunder god heard this, he fell silent for a moment, and then nodded. If he really recruited this force into eternal shocking thunder, after the thunder god lord saw the potential and strength of the other party, he might be interested in talents. This was not a good thing for eternal shocking thunder's current army. After all, with the invasion of demons, someone had to stand at the front line. If this force was not at the front line, the other forces of eternal shocking thunder would be at the front line. Out of selfishness, even if the Dragon Palace was very strong and had great potential, they would not recruit it. Boom, boom, boom. Blood splattered everywhere on the battlefield. All the disciples of the forces were bloodthirsty. The blood even condensed into a bloody mist in the sky. Wuxia's screams and the deaths of humans echoed in the area covered by meteorites. Dozens of people died every second in every force. Only the disciples of the Dragon Palace were killing Wuxia in an orderly manner. The Saturn Turtle was defending in front, forming an indestructible defense. The two-winged Demon Combat Division and the Thunder Division rarely died in close combat, with the help of dolphins. The Starwood Combat Division and the Sky Eye Arrow Division behind were the Grim Reapers, killing crazily. The Dragon Palace suffered very little losses. The Wuxia they killed was comparable to the Northern Expedition Trading Company. One had to know that the Northern Expedition Trading Company had 1.5 million disciples who were at least at the demigod level. The battle continued to unfold. 10 minutes later, Ao Chitian killed the 9 wisps of divine fire evil demon. The battle continued to advance forward bit by bit. From the first 500 kilometers, they continued to slaughter their way in for more than 1,000 kilometers. Hundreds of millions of demons were slowly being killed. The injured disciples are at the back to heal. Seeing that the demons' resistance was getting smaller and smaller, some of the demons flew toward the center of the damage. The voice of a thunder god resounded in everyone's ears. Phew! This made the injured disciples slightly relieved. At least eternal shocking thunder didn't force them to die. Thank you, Lord Thunder God. Hundreds of thousands of injured disciples immediately flew back and arrived behind eternal shocking thunder and the other factions. Their safety was greatly guaranteed. We have only stepped into 1,500 kilometers. This time, we will kill our way into one of Wuxia's strongholds. Thunder God continued to give orders. Set off. At the front, Lei Beichen shouted loudly, and the entire team proceeded forward. Wuxia's corpse had already been put away. Chapter 2135. 2135, 2135, disobeyed the order and died. Die? Hee I disobeyed. What can you do to me? The Dragon King. He actually dared to. When everyone heard the Dragon King's words, the surrounding forces were slightly shocked and filled with shock. The Dragon King actually dared to disobey the orders of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the leader of the Enchanting Divine Gate, as well as the orders of the Eternal Thunderclap, Northern Thunder, and Lei Tianming. After all, there were 3 peak godly state existences in front of them. Is the Dragon King courting death? If he openly disobeys the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Enchanting Divine Gate, he will probably be destroyed in the future. Some people thought to themselves as they looked at the Dragon Palace in unison. All the forces had witnessed the strength of the Dragon Palace just now. It was definitely a terrifying existence. However, this strength was still far inferior to the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Enchanting Divine Sect. The eyes of the Northern Expedition Trading Company's president and the Enchanting Divine Sect's sect master focused. They looked at Wang Xian with an ice-cold expression. Their eyes flickered with a cold, murderous intent. Dragon King, I think you guys don't want to live anymore. The Elder of Light narrowed his eyes slightly and spoke in a sinister tone. Dragon Palace, you dare to disobey the orders of 3 peak stage godly state experts? Do you want to die? If you want to die, we'll grant you your wish. As soon as the old man finished speaking, Lei Donglin, who was standing to the side, suddenly spoke up. Based on the current situation, he could tell that Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming wanted to use the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the enchanting Divine Gate to weaken the Dragon Palace's strength. If they were to deal with the Devil Den alone, they would definitely suffer a huge loss. If there was a peak Divine Realm Wuxia inside, it might be a devastating blow. However, if the Dragon Palace were to face a demon cave alone, it would be a burden to the other forces. He was naturally happy to see that. That's right, Dragon King. You'd better listen to the orders and think of the big picture. The Emperor of the God-burning God Dynasty said with a faint smile on his face. That's right. How dare you disobey the orders of 3 peak stage godly state lords? You are very powerful, but don't be arrogant. Your Dragon Palace's strength is obvious to all. You have the strength to fight against a demon cave alone. I agree with the 3 peak Divine Realm Lords. That's right, that's right. We've already given our orders before we came. As the Emperor of the God-burning God Dynasty spoke, the other forces around immediately echoed. The Dragon Palace's pressure would be much less if they fought against a demon cave, and their losses would also be much less. They were naturally happy to see that. Now that the Dragon King did not agree, they immediately stood on the side of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the enchanting Divine Sect. Haha! To fight against the demonic beasts, those who have the ability to survive will have to rely on their own abilities. When Wang Xian heard their words, he swept his gaze across them one by one. His face was filled with ridicule. He laughed out loud and waved his arm, for streams of majestic energy directly attacked the 4 demon lairs. You're courting death. When the Northern Expedition Trading Company, Lei Beichen and the rest saw Wang Xian making his move, their expressions changed slightly. Oh no! Especially those small factions, when they saw this scene, they revealed an embarrassed expression. Boom! 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 However, it was too late for them to defend themselves. The 4 streams of energy entered the demon caverns, and a terrifying explosion was heard. Roar! 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 In less than a second, furious roars were heard from the demon cave. It sounded like the roars of millions of demonic beasts. 4 demon caves. Isn't it better to deal with them together? When Wang Xian heard the roars from the demon cave, a smile appeared on his face. Damn it, Dragon Palace, just you wait. The leader of the demonic god sect's face turned cold as he shouted sternly. Prepare to face the enemy. After saying that, he shouted loudly. At this moment, it was obviously not the time for internal strife. All the factions held their weapons tightly with an embarrassed look on their faces, as they waited for Yao Xie to charge out from the demon cave. This Dragon King is really arrogant. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming looked at each other, with an embarrassed look on their faces. Once they fought together, with the Dragon Palace's terrifying combat strength and teamwork, they would definitely be able to kill as many demons as the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the others. Roar, roar, roar. Before anyone could think further, numerous blood-red eyes appeared in the demon cave, densely packed together. Chirp, chirp, chirp. At this moment, a sharp cry came from one of the demon caves, and it was different from the other demon caves. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the next moment, tens of thousands of demons with huge bone wings and sharp heads rushed out. Behind them, numerous demons of the same type followed. Roar! Roar! Soon after, tens of thousands of demons rushed out from the other 4 demon caves and charged at them. Prepare for battle! Attack! The Elder of Light shouted loudly. All the disciples immediately gripped their weapons tightly. The Northern Expedition Trading Company and the Enchanting Divine Sect, who were located in the center, were the first to face the attacks of the evildoers. They immediately released streams of energy. Prepare for battle! Wang Xian ordered the disciples of the Dragon Palace. Yes, as usual, they used the Saturn Turtle to defend the front. Each and every one of them was floating in the sky like a moving fortress, waiting for the evildoers who were charging towards them. Chirp, chirp. At this moment, an ear-piercing screech filled with violence suddenly resounded through the void. A flying Yao Xie, that was at least 10,000 meters in size flew out from the demon cave. Peak deity realm. A peak deity realm Yao Xie has appeared. Yao Xie, who was at the peak deity realm, directly attacked them. Everyone's expression changed slightly as they cried out in fear. Let me do it. A hint of solemnity appeared on the face of the Elder of Light. He shouted in a deep voice and immediately went forward to welcome them. At least 1 billion Yao Xie have come out. There are so many of them. Wang Xian looked into the demon cave with a solemn expression on his face. His yin-yang and 5 elements dragon eyes stared at the demon cave. Once there were 7 or 8, or even more peak of the godly state Yao Xie, he would leave this place with the members of the Dragon Palace without hesitation. Dragon King, with our strength, we shouldn't be in too much danger. This is the counterattack plan that Eternal Thunderclap came up with after a detailed investigation. Lei Dongxue said to Wang Xian from the side. Okay. Wang Xian nodded. He didn't make a move and stood quietly behind the Dragon Palace. With the strength of the Dragon Palace, it shouldn't be too much of a problem to fight against a demon lair alone. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. He couldn't listen to the arrangements of the Northern Expedition Trading Company. Kill, kill, kill. Violent sounds of fighting could be heard from the surroundings. Nearly 100 deity realm demons rushed out from each demon cave. The gods of the Northern Territory Alliance immediately went up to fight them. It seemed as if endless demons were rushing out from the demon caves. Roar! Roar! At this moment, roars that shook the sky came from the other 2 demon caves. There are 2 more peak god realm evil spirits. The eyes of the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the leader of the Charming God sect narrowed. Chapter 2136. 2136, 2136 lured them away. That's right, they dared to disobey our orders and make them pay. Lei Tianming's expression was slightly malevolent as he echoed Lei Beichen. The Dragon King disobeyed their orders and caused this situation. This made them hold a grudge. They must make the Dragon Palace know the consequences of disobeying their orders. If they could lure a peak god-level demonic beast to their position, they would definitely cause the Dragon Palace to suffer a huge loss. The president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company raised his eyebrows and stared at the peak god-level demonic beast flying toward the battlefield, his eyes shining. Leave it to me. I have an idea. The leader of the Charming God sect suddenly said with a cunning look on his face. Oh, the seductive Divine Gate leader has an idea? If that's the case, let the Dragon Palace put in more effort, hee. The leader of the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce said with a smile. Just watch. The seductive Divine Gate leader smiled faintly. He waved his arm, and a long spear appeared in his hand. Spear like a dragon. He growled and a metal attribute light directly attacked the peak stage god-level demonic beast. Roar! Yao Xie waved his terrifying tail and swept toward the metal spear. Bang! The metal spear shattered, and his blood-red eyes locked onto the gate master. With a roar, Yao Xie, who was at the peak of the godly state, charged toward him. Swoosh! The gate master moved and flew toward the sky above the Dragon Palace. It was only 100 kilometers away from the Dragon Palace, which was very close to the peak of the godly state. Clang! 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 While flying, he attacked the peak of the godly state Yao Xie with his long spear. Yao Xie chased after him, and black flames shot toward him. Swoosh! When they were about to reach the sky above the Dragon Palace, the leader moved his hand, and a bright dark divine pearl appeared in his hand. The divine darkness pearl emitted a dark luster and looked like a black gem. He waved his arm, and the divine darkness pearl directly floated 10,000 meters above the Dragon Palace. Such a position was already within the range of attack for Yao Xie, who was at the peak of the godly state. Roar, roar! As expected, when Yao Xie saw the divine darkness pearl, his blood-red eyes revealed a greedy look. He swayed his huge body and charged forward. That's right. The divine darkness pearl has a fatal attraction to Yao Xie. The Dragon Palace is going to suffer. Even if we gather the entire Dragon Palace's strength, It will be difficult to kill that peak god realm Wuxia. I'll go deal with the other peak god realm Wuxia. The president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company smiled when he saw this scene. As he spoke, his gaze locked onto another demon at the peak of the godly state, and he charged straight at it. Hee Dragon Palace? Dragon King? Soon, you will know the consequences of disobeying orders. Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming's lips curled up slightly as they looked on with smiles on their faces. At this moment, Wang Xian, who was floating behind the Dragon Palace, saw the leader of the demonic god sect charging over with a demon at the peak of the godly state. He even threw a divine darkness pearl to the sky above the members of the Dragon Palace. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Let the Dragon Palace deal with this demon. Consider it your punishment for disobeying orders. The enchanting divine sect leader was floating 10,000 meters above the divine darkness pearl. When he saw the demon opening its mouth and swallowing the divine pearl, he said with a cold smile, "Go down." At the same time, the long spear in his hand pointed toward the demonic beast below. A golden glow seemed to pierce through the void as it attacked the demonic beast directly. When the demonic beast saw the attack from the leader of the demonic faction, it let out a furious roar. Its sharp tail went straight for the golden glow. Buzz! A muffled sound of collision rang out. A dot of golden glow dissipated, and the sharp tail continued to attack him. Get lost! He roared angrily, and the long spear in his hand shook out streaks of golden light. In a short second, hundreds of thousands of golden lights appeared, densely covering Wuxia. He had used all of his strength in this attack. He was confident that Wuxia would fall heavily downwards. Buzz! However, just as he had just finished performing this move, an intense sense of danger enveloped his heart. At this moment, his heart seemed to have stopped beating, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Not good. Someone had launched a sneak attack. This was his first reaction. You want to harm our Dragon Palace? Die. A cold voice entered his ears, and a blood-red longsword slashed toward him from top to bottom. Damn it, how could it be him? His expression changed drastically, and he quickly dodged to the side. He did not expect that someone would sneak attack him at this time. He did not expect that the Dragon King could actually bring him a sense of threat of death. He had just performed a move, and he did not expect it at all. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout his body. He felt as if his body had been cut into two. His face was filled with horror as he let out a miserable cry. His entire body shot out a terrifying golden light as he dodged to the side. Roar! Roar! At this moment, he heard the roar of Wuxia coming from below. Consider yourself lucky. The Dragon King's voice resounded in his mind once again. He looked over and saw the Dragon King heading towards Wuxia, who was at the peak of the godly state, to attack him. The charming sect master, who had flown 50 kilometers away in an instant, felt a chill run down his spine. Through his spiritual senses, he found that 1/3 of his body had been cut off from his ear all the way to his shoulder. His bloody body made him look extremely miserable. If he was not a peak stage godly state expert, this attack would have caused him to lose 50% of his combat strength. Even so, he was still severely injured. Damn it, Dragon King. You are actually an expert at the peak of the godly state. He roared furiously. The bloody flesh that had been cut off began to squirm, and slowly began to recover. However, the energy required for the body to recover was very huge. What happened? Just now, Leader Yao Yi brought a peak godly state Yao Xia to the Dragon Palace, but he was ambushed and severely injured by the Dragon King. The Dragon King is also a peak godly state expert. Leader Yao Yi was seriously injured. Some people around were slightly shocked. How is this possible? The Dragon King is also a peak godly state expert. At this moment, Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming, who had been paying attention to the situation, looked extremely embarrassed. Chapter 2137. 2137, who was at the peak of the godly state, had fallen. You have ulterior motives. Do you still want to harm our Dragon Palace? Wang Xian controlled the five elements millstone to withstand the attack of Yao Xia, who was at the peak of the godly state. With a cold expression, he swept his gaze across the bewitching sect leader, Northern Expedition Trading Company, Lei Beichen, Lei Tianming, and the rest. Then he growled in a low voice. Dragon King. The bewitching sect leader's body was trembling slightly. His expression was extremely ugly. He was roaring in his heart, and was filled with killing intent. However, when he saw Wang Xian easily resisting Yao Xia, who was at the peak of the godly state, a hint of fear flashed across his eyes. The Dragon King was at the peak of the godly state. The strength of the entire Dragon Palace was already stronger than the flirtatious sect. That Dragon King is in existence at the peak of the godly state. The president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, who was fighting with the peak of the godly state, swept his gaze over and immediately frowned. A Dragon Palace with a peak stage godly state expert was a completely different concept from a Dragon Palace without a peak stage godly state expert. With a peak stage expert in charge, even the Northern Expedition Trading Company had to attach great importance to it. Kill! Wang Xian let out a cold roar, and a cold murderous aura spread out in all directions. This murderous aura was not only to face the demonic evil in front of him, but also to show off his strength to the Northern Expedition Trading Company and the demonic god sect. It also let them know that not everyone in the Dragon Palace could give orders. Roar! 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 Yao Xia, who was at the peak of the godly state, stared at Wang Xian with her blood-red eyes. She waved her huge and ferocious claws and attacked him. Let's test my current strength too. Wang Xian smiled wantonly. He stared at Yao Xia's claws without any fear. He raised his right palm. Buzz! His entire right arm turned into a dragon claw that was more than 1,000 meters in size. Dragonation in the palm. He shouted softly. The 1,000-meter-sized claw instantly expanded to a size of 100,000 meters. It blotted out the sky and the sun, completely blotting out the sun. Even Yao Xia's terrifying figure appeared extremely tiny in front of Wang Xian's dragon claw. Boom! A palm strike struck down, and a terrifying vibration was emitted. The surrounding air currents surged violently. Under this terrifying force, the demonic evil was sent flying backward. It has been a long time since I used a Dharma idol like the Dragon Nation in my palm. It seems that as my strength has increased, my Dharma idol has also received a huge boost. Wang Xian smiled faintly. He was floating in midair with a dragon claw on his arm that was 100,000 meters long. He looked extremely tiny. However, he was floating in midair with his arm at the side. He looked extremely shocking. Hiss this Dragon King's strength is so terrifying. What kind of claw is that? Lei Beichen and Lei Tianming, who had been watching this scene from the side, narrowed their eyes when they saw this scene. Their faces were filled with shock. So powerful. Even the leader of the enchanting god sect looked over with a grave expression. Roar! However, at this moment, a roar sounded from the last demon cave, causing the leader of the enchanting god sect to change his expression slightly. He hurriedly looked over, and when he saw another peak deity realm demonic beast appear, his expression changed slightly. A demon cave and a peak deity realm demonic beast. His gaze swept across the surroundings. Two peak of the godly state from the Northern Expedition Trading Company were fighting against the other two peak of the godly state demons. Chapter 2138. 2138, 2,138 peak of the godly state had fallen. There were 4 demon caves and 4 peak of the godly state Yao Xia. It would take a long time to kill the other party in a battle of the same peak of the godly state. Unless there was a huge gap between the two of them in the same level, or the two of them would fight with their lives on the line at the very beginning. Other than that, it was normal for the battle to last for half an hour. Wang Xian, and the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, could kill Yao Xia of the same level within half an hour. They were considered to be the stronger ones among the same level. The Old Man of Light, and the leader of the bewitching celestial sect, were still fighting against Yao Xia. The old man of light was still fine. He was not seriously injured when fighting against Wuxia. However, the leader of the bewitching celestial sect was in a rather miserable state. Before he fought against that Wuxia, he had already suffered a blow from Wang Xian. That blow had caused him to be severely injured. He could at most unleash 70% of his strength. Under such circumstances, he was immediately suppressed when he faced Wuxia, who was at the peak of the godly state. Now he was even more miserable. When he saw the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company killing Wuxia, he immediately cried out for help. Our sect leader was injured by the Dragon Palace before the battle. The situation is a little dangerous now. Damn it, it's all because of that Dragon King. If it wasn't for... Some of the charming divine sect's disciples and godly state experts saw this scene, and their expressions changed slightly. They growled in a low voice. Guild leader, please lend a hand. Lei Tianming saw the charming divine sect's sect leader in such a situation, and immediately said to the guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, with an embarrassed expression. The guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company gently adjusted his bamboo hat, and nodded his head slowly. All right, he shouted softly, and was about to make his move. At this moment, Wang Xian, who was hovering above the members of the Dragon Palace, saw that the leader of the charming divine sect was in danger. He revealed a smile on his face. When he saw that the president of the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce was about to go forward to provide support, he narrowed his eyes slightly. A wave of cold air directly charged toward the president of the Northern Expedition Chamber of Commerce. The cold murderous aura was not concealed at all. It was completely locked onto him. Boom. The president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company sensed this murderous aura. He was stunned and immediately turned around to look at Wang Xian. What's wrong, Dragon King? Are you going to make an enemy out of our Northern Expedition Trading Company? He stared at Wang Xian with a cold expression and asked in a sinister tone. Then what is the Dragon King going to do? When some of the people around saw this scene, their expressions changed slightly. How can that be? My Dragon Palace doesn't dare to be your enemy. Since you've killed a demonic beast, you should take a break. Let's both take a break too. Don't cause trouble for no reason. Wang Xian said to the guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, with a smile on his face. The leader of the seductive divine gate had attracted the demonic beast, who was at the peak of the godly state, over. He wanted to cause trouble for the Dragon Palace. If Wang Xian's strength had not improved to 4 wisps of divine fire not long ago, the Dragon Palace might have been doomed this time. How could Wang Xian let him off just like that? The face of the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company changed slightly. He stared at him coldly. Chapter 2139. 2139 Eternal Thunderclap's Favoritism. Although I can only obtain half of the demonic beast's corpses, I will gain more if I kill more of them. The intense battle continued. Wang Xian scanned his surroundings to make sure that no more demonic beasts would come out from the demon lair. Then he moved his body and charged toward the celestial-level demonic beasts. With his help, the pressure on the gods from the other factions was greatly reduced. They heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Wang Xian with some respect. The series of events just now had filled their hearts with respect towards the Dragon King. The leader of the enchanting god sect wanted to divert the trouble to the east, so that the peak stage god-level demons could kill the disciples of the Dragon Palace. However, the Dragon King had taken them by surprise and attacked them directly, causing them to be seriously injured. Now that the leader of the seductive god sect had asked for help, the Dragon King had locked onto the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company, making it impossible for him to save him. Each and every one of his methods caused them to be extremely terrified. However, his actions also caused some people to admire him. If the leader of the seductive god sect had not fallen, the Dragon Palace would have faced the revenge of the seductive god sect and the Northern Expedition Trading Company. Now that the seductive god sect's leader had fallen, the Northern Expedition Trading Company would have to consider if they wanted to deal with the Dragon King. Especially the strength that the Dragon King had displayed now. He was no weaker than the president of the Northern Expedition Trading Company. Crack, crack, crack. Above the enchanting celestial sect, Lei Tianming clenched his fist tightly and let out a crisp sound. He stared at the Dragon King's figure with a ferocious expression. When he saw the Dragon King unleashing his might to kill the celestial-level demonic beasts, his body trembled slightly. The death of the enchanting celestial sect's leader was a huge loss to him. Time passed slowly and the battle slowly entered its end. After Wang Xian had killed one celestial-level demonic evil, he swept his gaze across the surroundings and returned to the sky above the members of the Dragon Palace. Basically, there were no more demonic evil in front of the Dragon Palace. Dragon King. The Dragon Palace has killed more than 500 million demonic evil in total. There are close to 100 celestial-level demonic evil, which is the most among all the factions. Lei Dongxue said excitedly when he saw Wang Xian returning. Okay. Wang Xian nodded his head faintly and revealed a satisfied smile. With so many demonic beasts' corpses, even if they could only obtain half of them, they would be able to increase the strength of the members of the Dragon Palace greatly. His gaze swept across the area below. The loss of the members of the Dragon Palace did not exceed 2,000. Among them, only 5 god-level members had died. 1/8 of the loss was nothing to the Dragon Palace. He looked around and saw that many forces had only lost half of their members. They had suffered heavy losses. This made the experts of many forces look gloomy. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the sound of flying came from the right. 700,000 to 800,000 people were flying toward them. The leaders were 4 old men. At this moment their bodies were filled with blood. Some of the fresh blood was even on their battle armors. Their hair was disheveled, and they were filled with an austere and barbaric aura. They were the thunder god of eternal shocking thunder and his disciples. The difference was that there were only 4 of the 5 thunder gods. Out of the 2 to 3 million disciples, there were only 700,000 to 800,000. The losses were heavy and extremely tragic. Kill them all. Chapter 2140. 2140 in the final battle of 2140. Ha! The 4 thunder gods obviously didn't expect him to be so powerful. They stared at Wang Xian with sparkling eyes. All the surrounding forces were slightly shocked as they stared at Wang Xian. No matter what, we will deduct 20% of the demonic corpses of the demonic god sect, and 20% of the demonic corpses of the Dragon Palace during the internal strife on the battlefield. It's settled then. One of the thunder gods stared at Wang Xian and said coldly. What? Wang Xian's expression changed slightly when he heard his words. Based on what? He took a step forward and questioned the thunder god with a gloomy expression. Based on the fact that we are the eternal thunderclap, and based on the fact that we are the thunder god, is that enough? The thunder god replied with a cold expression when he heard Wang Xian's question. The 4 thunder gods looked down at Wang Xian with disdain in their eyes. Wang Xian's face darkened as his eyes flashed with a cold glint. Dragon King, forget it. When Lei Dongxue saw this scene, he quickly walked up to Wang Xian and said, Let's go. He took a deep look at the 4 thunder gods, Lei Tian, and the rest of the eternal thunderclap before he turned around and left. Lord Thunder God, I'll wait for the Dragon King to apologize to all of you. The Dragon King is a little arrogant. Lei Dongxue's heart was filled with bitterness when he saw Wang Xian leaving with the disciples of the Dragon Palace. He quickly spoke to the 4 thunder gods. This Dragon King is really arrogant. One of the thunder gods narrowed his eyes. His eyes were filled with coldness. Hee. The other 3 thunder gods smiled coldly. Apparently, they had a lot of opinions about the Dragon King. Go, he will regret it. One of the thunder gods said faintly, and turned to leave. The attention that they paid to the Dragon Palace, at the beginning, had completely disappeared at this moment. This Dragon King is so tough. He even dares to be so rude to the thunder gods. The 4 thunder gods have opinions about him. This Dragon King is a bit reckless. Some people whispered to each other when they saw the thunder gods and the Dragon King leaving. With this Dragon King's character, I don't know how he managed to live for so long. The bright elder from the Northern Expedition Trading Company stared at Wang Xian's figure and said faintly, "Perhaps it's because we haven't encountered any powerful opponents who dared to do this to the thunder gods of eternal shock. Let's not provoke this reckless man for the time being." The guild leader of the Northern Expedition Trading Company said indifferently as he turned around and left. Don't think that just because you have some strength that you dare to be arrogant. Dragon King, why don't you take a look at what this place is like? Lei Tianming clenched his fists tightly as he flew towards the interior of the steel planet with a face full of fury. Lei Tianming is really angry. He might use his grandfather's power. Lei Beichen looked over, and his eyes sparkled. He gestured to the Northern Expedition Trading Company and led them away. Dragon King, don't be angry. Eternal Shocking Thunder is very strong. Our Dragon Palace is far inferior to him. In the lounge behind the Steel City wall, Lei Dongxue caught up with Wang Xian and said worriedly, "I know." Wang Xian had already suppressed the anger in his heart and nodded his head. How many thunder gods are there currently in Eternal Shocking Thunder? However, he was very unwilling to give up just like that. One sentence was enough to deprive the Dragon Palace of 20% of the demonic corpses. That was a huge number. Dragon King, there are currently 15 thunder gods in Eternal Shocking Thunder. Wang Xian raised his head and instructed Lei Dongxue. It's the Dragon King, Dragon King. All the demonic corpses killed by the Dragon Palace belong to my merit points. With the number of demonic corpses killed by the Dragon Palace, the merit points should be enough for me to exchange for a demonic corpse at the peak of the godly state. Lei Dongxue suddenly said, "Oh, is that so? If it doesn't affect me, I'll exchange for it." "All right. I have a few thunder god beads here, as well as the divine artifacts and formations that I obtained from the Yu Huatian divine sect. Think of a way to exchange for some demonic corpses with the thunder god beads." Wang Xian had an idea. He took out the thunder god beads and some treasures that he obtained from killing the eternal thunderclap expert at the energy tide. The value of these treasures was very high. They were comparable to the corpses of demonic beasts at the peak of the godly state. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. Dragon King, wait for my good news. Lei Dongxue nodded her head. She was already a godly state expert with 3 wisps of divine fire. Coupled with her special identity, she was able to obtain some demonic corpses. Wang Xian looked at her leaving figure with a satisfied expression. It seemed that it was not a waste to consume a soul-returning embryo. 2 days later, Lei Dongxue obtained 1 demonic corpse at the peak of the godly state, 5 demonic corpses with 9 wisps of divine fire, and more than 10 demonic corpses with 7 or 8 wisps of divine fire. Upon seeing these demonic corpses, Wang Xian's face lit up. These corpses were enough for the Dragon Palace to add 2 members, who could match the combat strength of 9 wisps of divine fire, and 1 member, at the peak of the godly state. An additional member who is at the peak of the godly state. Although the Dragon Palace is still weak, at the very least, they won't be afraid of the Northern Expedition Trading Company. Wang Xian narrowed his eyes slightly, and immediately summoned the Dragon Palace of the Divine Kingdom. He began to increase the strength of the members of the Dragon Palace to prepare for the next phase. 10 days passed slowly. The steel planet was peaceful. However, under this tranquility, everyone could feel the difference in the atmosphere. It was like the tranquility before a storm. It was as if a more powerful battle was brewing. Buzz. Greetings, Master God. At this moment, in a command center in the center of the Steel City wall, 9 experts at the peak of the godly state were half kneeling on the ground. They were bowing to the phantom in front of them with respect and even fervor. The phantom was formed by lightning, and it contained a terrifying pressure. Even though it was just a phantom, it still emitted a power that could make peak god realm experts tremble in fear. We've already investigated the nest of the demon dragon that summoned Yaoxia. Mobilize all the forces on the steel planet to go to the nest of the demon lair. The phantom of the Thunder God Lord ordered them indifferently. Lord God Lord, the strength of that demon dragon. I'm afraid that The 9 Thunder Gods were slightly shocked, as they said hesitantly. I've left law lightning in his body. When you guys go over, I'll use all my law power, so that he won't be able to use any of his strength. At that time, you only need to kill 8 or 9 peak god realm, Wuxia around him, and you'll be able to easily get rid of him. There are 12 peak god realm experts on the steel planet. I'll send 2 more. After this success, I'll make those 3 peak god realm experts from the Northern Alliance Thunder Gods. The Thunder God Lord's phantom ordered them. Yes, Lord God Lord. We'll definitely complete the mission. The 9 Thunder Gods replied with determination.